hi, Ricky. I'm really glad that we could speak because I wanted to have this conversation about your upcoming workshop in Montreal. And the first question really is like, whatever gave you the idea of doing a whole workshop on mistakes? Where did that come from?
Where did that come from? Well, first of all, because I do a lot of mistakes.
My God, I thought
And
it was only me.
yes, well, exactly, and that's it. I found myself doing all these mistakes, and then I noticed that doing supervision, supervision is much more fruitful if you actually talk about stuff that is difficult and not the instances where you're doing great. So for me, mistakes is a great learning opportunity. It's a great place to develop. And so I've just kind of distilled or like listened, I looked at the mistakes that I'm doing, and it noticed that there's a kind of a pattern that, these are some of the typical stuff that I do and some of the typical stuff that, the people I supervise do. And so the first time I did it was very scary because there's a lot of self-disclosure, and you are actually asking people to be quite vulnerable
Yes.
because we would much rather talk about what we're good at, especially when we're with our peers, right?
Mm.
So that's how it came up, and yeah, and it's a I don't know if you're allowed to say this, but it's a very cool workshop. It's very fun.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about these patterns. You say you've identified patterns. Are there patterns that are specific to the ACT model, or what patterns did you find?
Well, I think the patterns are probably general, but since I'm do act, I kind of applied act language to it, and so this workshop will be for kind of a 2 for 1. You do get a kind of a lot of introduction or a lot of or it might be repetition of the act model, and then apply to these kind of mistakes. So one example could be if you've been to any of my workshop, you probably heard of this, but there's one example where I'm with a client and I'm telling her about acceptance. I'm kind of teaching acceptance, and I'm telling
Yeah.
her to accept, and pointing my finger almost. Um, and my own behavioral repertoire is absolutely struggle, fight, avoidance. Um, and so there's a huge discrepancy between what I'm talking about and what I am showing her. And so, you know, in this workshop, we'll go through the processes on both how to deal with clients, but also to, practice acceptance in that room when you are, lost or insecure or scared or whatever that shows up. And so I kind of seen all these examples that can be shown through the ACT model of kind of lacking acceptance, and you're very fused with the story and not very mindful, etc. Um, so yeah, I think there are kind of general mistakes, but we'll talk about them in ACT language so that people will connect it to the model of ACT.
Sounds great. And have you planned also some experiential exercises around those mistakes?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I firmly believe, the way I was taught ACT by, people like yourself and other of my mentors and superheroes, is that there is a difference between talking about ACT and actually doing ACT, which is also one of the mistakes that I will be mentioning, that, you can read a book and you can kind of talk about it without actually doing it. So we will, of course, have like discussions, and I will bring slides. But what we will do is we'll practice, and there will be a lot of training where we practice how not to do it and then how to do it. So you kind of get the distinction between a repertoire of non-workability versus a repertoire of workability, which is both. It's kind of vulnerable and also very fun. It's a very playful workshop where we get to be a little, goofy, in the service of, broadening our repertoire, but where we get to act out and we get to yell at our clients, and you know we get to practice bad language, and etc., etc. This is quite fun.
Pretty cool. So after your workshop, people won't make mistakes anymore?
Well,
You don't make mistakes anymore yourself, right?
I'm absolutely perfect. Well, hopefully they will make mistakes, and they will be less afraid of making them. So my wish or my intention behind this is that we keep doing mistakes, because mistakes comes with development. So I'm actually inviting us to keep developing ourselves and try new stuff, and then be aware when it's working and not working, and use every mistake that you make as a learning opportunity, and see what could have done better, or what could have done differently. So you will keep making mistakes, but you'll probably be more aware of it, and you'll probably see them as a learning opportunity instead of something to beat yourself up with, because we're so good at that. Like, there's no, now here I'm talking about the clients and us as two, like, different, but this, we're all in the same boat. And so in this workshop, we'll talk about clients, as the people that we serve, and us as therapists, but there's no difference. But we are so, like, humans are so good at beating ourselves up whenever we're not doing, whenever we're not perfect. And I think sometimes therapists are like, I should know better, because I do that. Like, I teach acceptance, then I should be able to know to do acceptance in every part of my life. And I'm not. And so I beat myself up, which is so harmful and not very useful for anybody. So there will be a lot of, like, compassion exercises, and self-compassion towards us as therapists.
Very cool. If somebody doesn't know anything about ACT, or maybe even doesn't use ACT as their main modality, is there anything for them in your workshop?
Yeah, the workshop will cover the ACT the ACT hexaflex, because ACT is more than the hexaflex, but will cover the processes of psychological flexibility. So for those who are new to ACT, it'll be also a little introduction to the model. And for those who are maybe familiar with ACT, they will recognize, they will have heard some of this before, but they might hear it in a new way. So in that way, it's kind of a workshop that is for everybody who is finding themselves to struggle. And so again, people who know ACT will recognize the language, and people who are new are much welcome and will get an introduction to the model.
So because you said earlier the mistakes are kind of general, universal in some sense. So somebody could come and work on their mistakes, even if after that they use other things in addition to ACT, or maybe not ACT as the central modality.
Absolutely. I think, like, so the one I mentioned, like, I call it walking the talk, is like actually being, doing what you're saying. And so in ACT, it's, we talk about acceptance, and we want to model acceptance. If you come from another tradition or have another language, I'm sure that is true as well. If you are working with, I don't know, cognitive restructuring, you might want to be able to do some of that stuff yourself. If you are working on, compassion, you might want to, practice compassion skills regardless of the tradition that, is behind that. So in that sense, it's general. And the language, I speak ACT. So there, that's the language that I use around it. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'm really excited that we have finally managed to invite you. I'm really looking forward to this workshop and to have you with us in Montreal.
Well, it's an honor to finally come over. I know that you gather some very cool people over there, and I know that this will be a translated workshop, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
We won't translate it back into Danish, though.
No, okay. Well, I can do that.
Yeah, you can do that, and we'll translate it into French with very good and precise translations. So
Yeah, exactly. But
excellent.
this will be, I hopefully, uh, sometimes it scares us when we talk about mistakes, but I hope people will see this is a place to play and to grow in a frame of compassion and fun.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and I really like the idea, and I was really interested by the subject because I've come to notice that I do some of my best learning from my mistakes.
exactly.
Very
So we
cool.
will we will be in this together, and I'm much looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. See you soon.
See you soon.